Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you again to the monthly seminars with the SPE Hydrogen Technical Sections. Today we have very interesting topics to cover the hydrogen journey in Oman and in the MENA region. I'd like to give you a background about the technical SPE technical section, which has been started almost more than a year. The aim is to bring together technical professional and academia who are active or have a deep interest in the use of hydrogen as an energy carrier and as a potential new energy source. This technical sections is one of almost 15 technical sections with SPE, aims to share knowledge, experience, leading practices, and promote industry awareness and enhance technical competencies. One of the key elements that we have is in SPE hydrogen MENA section is to facilitate the knowledge sharing. And with that, we do have our esteemed guest that would like to share with us a very interesting journey about Oman journey in the hydrogen. Rumaitha Al-Busaidi is a leading strategist in Oman green hydrogen transition, working at the intersections of energy policies, climate diplomacy, and sustainable development. She currently serves as a business development and an in-country value manager at Hydro. So I just introduce you to Rumaitha, and Rumaitha today will share quite detailed, interesting presentations about Oman journey. And with that, I will hand over the platform to Rumaitha.
Thank you so much, Talal, for that introduction. I'll be sharing my screen and kind of walk you through the Oman Green Hydrogen Strategy, and happy to kind of answer any questions that you have as we kind of go through the presentation towards the end. So the presentation for today will move into 5 key pillars that we'll be discussing today. First of all, the green hydrogen strategy for Oman, what it is, what actually really pushed the journey towards that, where we started to where we are in terms of the second pillar of the journey, shared infrastructure, which is what we consider our unique selling point here in Oman and is one of the main reasonings behind attracting a lot of key developers that are working on these projects in the country, and then giving you more details on the current round that we have, which is the round 3 auction details, and hopefully a way forward on how we could take things forward as a result of today's presentation. So starting off with why basically hydrogen. This is a question we get asked a lot, and maybe the overarching theme is basically decarbonization and net zero. We hear that as well constantly. For Oman, it announced its net zero plans to achieve it by 2050, and hydrogen is one of those 6 technologies that it has identified to help Oman reach there. However, the main reasoning behind also moving into hydrogen is not only the net zero targets and decarbonization, it also is to spur a lot of economic growth for the country as Oman looks into switching into a hydrogen-centric economy in the future. And as a result of that vision that we have of really being a hydrogen-centric economy, we've taken quite concrete actions quite quickly. In a span of 2.5 years, we have allocated 50,000 square kilometers of land. And the way that we give away these lands for hydrogen production is through the auction process. We have completed 2 auction rounds and are in the process at the moment of actively promoting the 3rd round of auction, which I will share details on shortly. And then as a result of these 2 auction rounds that we have completed, we have 9 projects that we have awarded. These projects culminate with a production expected of around 1.5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030 once these projects come online, and an FDI that comes into the country of around $50 billion of investments. Now, these actions have a pillar that kind of pushes things forward, and that's the Oman Green Hydrogen Strategy, and also what I mentioned, our USP, the shared infrastructure for green hydrogen. Our strategic objectives. So I think I kind of alluded to it in the very beginning, but we divide our strategic move to green hydrogen into 5 key objectives. The first one is to ensure energy security, not only for Oman, but for global demand. Diversifying the economy. I think we are all talking about diversification and also onshoring a lot of that supply chain and those connected industries to create those long-term green jobs. Decarbonization, specifically not only to decarbonize the country to safeguard for sustainable future for Oman, but hopefully for the globe as well as we contribute to our targets there. And creating a green hydrogen sector with a competitive levelized cost of hydrogen, specifically putting us within that competitive market in the energy sector when we talk about hydrogen. And finally, supporting innovation and ensuring that we're building that capabilities for Oman in this new sector. Now, another question is why specifically green hydrogen? As we all know, hydrogen has multiple colors, and Oman focuses majority of its projects on green hydrogen. And the main reason behind that is the combination of wind and solar that we have in the country. The combination of the solar and wind resources in Oman is amongst the top 5 in the world. So that really puts us in the opportunity to really capitalize on this resource that we have. And on the right side of the screen, I did mention the 50,000 square kilometers of land that have been awarded or allocated for green hydrogen projects. And these are where they're located. You'll see zone 1, 2, and 3. So Duqm, Al Jazira, and Dhufar are the areas that have those land earmarked for green hydrogen production. And it is Hydrom, the entity that I work for, it's our role to then delineate those lands, make them ready for the international market before we offer them into the auction process. And also, the main reason we are moving into this is because of the targets that Oman has announced. So back in October of 2022, we announced our production targets to the world, and that is an interim target of 1 million to 1.5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, and an overarching goal of up to 8.5 million tons by 2050. Based on these numbers, we have been named by the International Energy Agency to be expected to become one of the top 10 exporters of hydrogen by 2030. And obviously, when we talk about the production of hydrogen, we're really referring to both exports, which is mainly into the Bangon center of both Europe and Asian markets, but also local Omani demand for that hydrogen. And also when the target was announced back in October of 2022, we were very clear as the Omani government that in order for us to establish this and meet those targets, we need to make sure that there's multiple elements that are developed at the same side alongside that production target. So it's not only production and really producing hydrogen, is everything that is connected to that green hydrogen ecosystem, starting from the policies and regulations to the supply chain, making sure there is demand for it, both creating the local demand in Oman and also looking at it for export, green hydrogen supply, the infrastructure, and most importantly as well, the capacity and skills that are needed to really run this ecosystem in general. So Hydrom, which is Hydrogen Oman, that's a kind of a short form for the name. We basically assume different roles depending on where we are in the value chain. You will hear a lot that Hydrom plays the role of an orchestrator because we basically move depending on where we are in the value chain to kind of make sure things are moving according to that target that has been set by Oman. So we lead in some components that fall within our responsibility, but also play an incubation role for some of these roles that are required within the ecosystem, but still doesn't have a lead. So we incubate them until they're spun off into its separate industry or separate entity, but also play a lot of coordination roles with different players as well, and an advisory role. How that looks like within the whole ecosystem is basically the way that you see it on the screen right now. So starting off with the policies and regulations, we as Hydrom are not the regulator. That is also another misconception. Hydrom was formed as basically a vehicle to move things forward, but we don't have a vested interest in regulating the sector specifically. So we're not in charge of regulating the sector. We're not also, based on our mandate, we're not allowed to develop the projects. We actually coordinate and award projects to developers that will be developing the projects. And we're not the investor either. The investor will be the government of Oman if it's required in specific areas of the value chain, but that we allow the private sector as well on the free market to kind of come in and invest as well. So in the policies and regulations side, we play an advisory role to the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, specifically when it comes to designing policies for the green hydrogen industry, when it comes to strategy and implementing that strategy and master planning the 50,000 square kilometers of land. So Hydrom is the custodian of those lands and really works on making sure those lands are master planned, but also make sure that we meet those targets for the strategy that was announced back in October of 2022. And then we also lead the auction process. So we're the main front and center entity that kind of pushes and promotes the auction, allocates those land to the market, and also signs the agreements and awards those blocks to the green hydrogen developers on behalf of the government. Our role then switches to more on the green hydrogen development side and the shared infrastructure side to more of the coordination, because there's already main players that are working on these elements in the green hydrogen production. It's the developers that we've signed agreements with. In the shared infrastructure, we've allocated national champions that have that experience to build it. And then when it comes to logistics, it's very similar, where we play a logistics coordinator role with the multiple players that we have in Oman. Something that we envision in the future in terms of an incubation role is specifically when it comes to local demand. We know that there will be increasing demand as the projects grow and as the industry develops and matures. So that is a role that we're planning on incubating once the production starts, to really incubate local demand and domestic demand for green hydrogen, and hopefully spin it off in the future to spun off industries as a result of that. And something that we also lead that is pretty much cross-sectional all across the value chain is the in-country value creation, looking at ways that we can maximize value for Oman, be it in the employment side, in the R&D side, in the domestic sourcing side, but also importantly in the building that ecosystem of industries and connected industries. And in the talent and skills, we play an advisory role for multiple players that are involved as well within that sector. In terms of our journey started back in 2021 when we started looking at is it going to be feasible for Hydrom to kind of switch into a hydrogen economy or not? And from there on, things kind of moved quite quickly. By March 2022, of that activity of really finalizing the feasibility study, we got royal directives to establish the required strategy, the frameworks, the policies, and also establishing the Directorate General for Renewable Energy and Hydrogen in the Ministry of Energy and Minerals that serves as the main directorate that regulates the sector. And then by October, we announced a strategy, but also Hydrom was announced as the vehicle to orchestrate the sector. Immediately after that, we launched the auction round, the first auction round a month after we were formed, and announced the winners of that first round in June of 23, and then launched the second auction round immediately after that with the awarding of those projects in April of 2024. And in April of this year, we announced the launch of the third auction round as well. Some snapshots of the projects. You hear a lot about the projects and the auction round, so maybe this gives you more of a detailed view of who we have in the ecosystem at the moment when it comes to project development. In total, we have 23 companies organized in 9 consortiums and 9 projects. The first round of projects that were awarded were in Duqm, and we have 6 projects in Duqm at the moment. And the second round of auction, which concluded last year, we awarded 3 projects in total. Another question we get asked is which one is ahead of the others? They all have multiple timelines. I'll explain a bit more as to why that is. But the one that is more advanced and has reached FID and is currently under construction is project number 6, and that's the Acme project, which is in the special economic zone of Duqm at the moment. So like I said, the total of these 9 projects that we have are expected to produce 1.5 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030. That keeps us bang on the target that we've set for ourselves for the 2030 production. And now the coming round is basically looking at the 2040 target, because we won't stop until we have to meet that 8.5 million tons of green hydrogen production. So the ecosystem in general of green hydrogen kind of is 3, you could kind of divide it in Oman into 3 aspects. The first one is specifically the hydrogen production and the projects themselves. The scope of that falls on the developers. So the projects are integrated in total. So the expectation of the scope of the developer in this case is the renewable energy generation. So that's the wind and solar production, in addition to using that green electricity to power your electrolysis to produce the green hydrogen. And then if the plan is to export, which is the majority of the projects here, they will need to transfer that green hydrogen or convert it into a derivative of their choice. So we are not prescriptive when it comes to the type of derivative. The developer has a choice to choose. In total, we have more ammonia projects. So 8 ammonia projects and 1 seal project that is expected to come from these 9 projects. And finally, offtake is on the developer, be it domestic offtake or international offtake. That is on the scope of the developer, because they're the ones that are able to set the price of the green hydrogen production. When it comes to the shared infrastructure, and that's something that we are stepping in, and I'll explain more now. That is basically providing electricity transmission lines from the upstream production blocks, which is where the renewables and the green hydrogen are located, and connecting it with the downstream area where your derivative synthesis and your port is located. So we provide those green transmission lines, and also a water pipeline, so building the desalination and providing that water, pure drinking water quality or portable water quality to the upstream blocks, and finally that green hydrogen gas pipeline. These 3 elements fall on Hydrom and the government of Oman to build, and is not on the scope of the developer. That shows, and the main reason it is very popular is because we show that we're sharing the risk with the developer to be able to co-develop the projects together. And at the moment, we just completed last month pre-feed and are about to enter the feed stage for the shared infrastructure. And in terms of the enablers, that's the other part, which includes logistics, permitting, governance, human capital. We work cross-sectional with a lot of stakeholders to kind of ensure that elements as well are taken care of and are being developed in parallel with the other 2 aspects of the green hydrogen ecosystem in Oman. Now, when it comes to shared infrastructure as well, we have allocated national champions, like I said, who have the expertise to develop these packages. So for the electricity, and that's the grid transmission lines, we have the Oman Electricity Transmission Company that is the national champion to develop that package. The hydrogen gas pipelines is with the OQ Gas Networks, which is the national gas networks player in Oman. They have a lot of expertise, and also one of their shareholders, Fluxus from Belgium. So there's a lot of expertise coming from Europe as well on how to build these hydrogen pipelines. And finally, in the water aspect, it's Nema Water who will be in charge of the desalination plant building, but also the water pipelines. In a snapshot, this is how it looks like, where on the top left corner, you will actually see the blocks that we conceptually award, and that's where the renewables and green hydrogen production will be located. And then you will see the blue pipeline, which represents the water, the green pipeline, which represents the green hydrogen, and the overhead green and white lines that represent the grid transmission lines. The blocks itself are about 100 kilometers away from the port area and the free zone area. And the main reasoning behind this is because we're auctioning off the best premium resourced lands. So these are the areas that have the best wind and solar combination. And we are staying true to our word to offer the best locations to ensure that there is a competitive levelized cost of hydrogen as well. And that's where this infrastructure also comes in as an add-on as well to kind of make sure that there is connectivity on the integrated project. Something as well in terms of timelines, the infrastructure itself will follow the same timelines as the projects. So once the first project takes FID, the common use infrastructure will take FID. And at the moment, like I said, we're currently in the feed stage, about to kick off feed stages for all the three packages that I mentioned. The vision, however, like I mentioned in the earlier slide, in the first slide of my presentation, is economic growth. And the way that we see that is using the pipeline, the hydrogen gas pipeline, to really expand that growth across Oman. And the way that we look at it is through this pipeline, the green hydrogen gas pipeline. We're looking at allocating it into phases to develop it. In total, it's approximately 2,000 kilometers of new hydrogen pipelines spread across Oman. And the phases are, the three phases are, the first phases, which are the black lines here, is going to focus mainly on the hubs that we have located for green hydrogen production that is akin to where the 50,000 kilometers of land is. And then the next phase for 2040, you will have the red pipelines that really connect with the northern parts of the industrial areas of Oman, mainly Suhara and Sur. Sur, there's a major LNG port that will would require a lot of decarbonization targets there, and fertilize as well. And Suhar is the major player that consumes the most gray hydrogen, as is the case now. And the plan is hopefully to provide green hydrogen in the near future by 2040. By 2050, the full country hopefully will be connected with the pipeline, including the capital of Muscat, where the plan is to spur as much localization of key industries and connected industries into the country to ensure that we have that growth that we're aspiring to have as well as a result of this pipeline. Something also that is always a question is the ICV and domestic industry development. Are they key? Obviously, they're always key in any energy project in Oman. And if it's a green transition project specifically, it's even more important. So the way that we look at localization in general is kind of two ways. One is the traditional ICV that we talk about in energy, which is the employment, the education and research, and domestic sourcing. But the other aspect, which is way more important, specifically in the new industry, is the domestic industry development. So we tend to ask the developers questions of what are you going to be doing to develop the industry, either with the expertise that you have within your consortium, either in the upstream industries or in the downstream industries. And how that looks like is as follows. So when we talk about upstream, what we're referring to is mainly the solar panels, the wind turbines, the electrolysis. And when we refer to downstream, it's mostly in the industrial use, the derivatives and the fuels. But there's also a lot of opportunities that is within the common use infrastructure, be it in the water transport, in the hydrogen transport, or electricity transmission as well. And it doesn't stop there. There's a lot of other components as well, be it in the manufacturing side, in the component and equipment side, in the raw materials side, that actually can contribute to the full value chain as well. And when we did a lot of this analysis, specifically when it comes to raw materials, we just were quite overwhelmed with the numbers, and quite also thankful that there's a big number that really creates the justification to actually have these industries localizing in Oman. So the numbers in blue are the targets for 2030 based on the 2030 targets. So those are the 9 projects we're expecting. And then the green numbers are the 2050 targets. And you could see that there's a lot of increase when it comes to that, be it in the main components of the upstream side, so solar panels, wind turbines, electrolyzers, but also in raw materials, be it aluminum, steel, silicon, glass. All of these are components that will be required in quite a lot quantities to contribute to the sector as we kind of build this sector from the ground up. And also something worth highlighting as well is we're not only looking at the actual opportunities in the industry, we're also looking at what requirements and enablers are needed, be it in the supporting infrastructure. So looking at roads, the roads enough or heavy, can take heavy enough material to be transported to one point to the other. Do we have enough regulations and incentives to bring about that localization to the country? Do we have enough human talents and capabilities? And is the business ecosystem agile enough to really attract these businesses? And as a result of that, we did what we call the ecosystem readiness workshops and lab last year, and kind of divided it into 5 pillars. The main one was looking at permitting. How can we streamline permitting? How can we make sure that we have logistics coordinated from the mapping of all the requirements that will be needed in terms of materials coming into the port, getting the most suitable routes to kind of transport these materials and staging and so on. Looking at EPC capabilities, if these 9 projects start up construction at the same time, the capabilities in Oman will surpass will be less than what is actually needed in terms of the project. So how can we enhance and empower and really get more EPC capabilities into the country? Looking at workforce development as well, and most importantly, local content. How can all these opportunities create local content opportunities as well for Oman? Now, a bit on the 3rd round of auction, what we are offering at the moment is a land in Duqm, up to 300 square kilometers. It is as per the other sister projects away from the special economic zone at Duqm, around 100 kilometers away. It has world-class wind and solar radiation profiles as per usual and known for in that part of the country, and access to key demand markets in EU and Asia. And basically, when it comes to specifically the numbers that we're looking for in terms of the wind and solar resources, we have up to 8.3 meters per second wind speeds and really spectacular solar irradiation figures of around 2,310 kilowatts per hour per square meter. And what we have made interesting this time around for specifically the developers is they have the ability to configure the land the way that they see fit. Previously, what we did was offer a fixed land of around 300 square kilometers, but we went to the market in December and January of this year. And what we heard from the market is, can we have the flexibility of bidding for a smaller land size? So that is allowed and that is possible this time around. The lowest land size that you could bid as a developer is 100 square kilometers, and that really is in sync with what the market actually, what we're hearing from the market specifically for players who are really focused on renewables focus rather than just an energy company that has both fossils and renewables. So it's kind of making sure that we are inclusive as possible within the process itself. So some high level more details in regards to that, like I mentioned, in terms of wind speed and solar radiation. The topography as well this time around is quite flat. You don't have a lot of constraints or hilly topography that you would need to really work around, specifically when it comes to wind installations, but also something we get asked a lot if phasing is permitted. Unfortunately, that is not allowed, but you have the ability to ask for additional land for future expansion if you want to bid for smaller land and then think of expansion in the future. And a snapshot of how that common use infrastructure will look like in Duqm, specifically to the location of the project itself. So it has the direct connectivity to both the water, the hydrogen pipeline, but also making sure that you have grid transmission lines that will be able to connect to the block itself and the downstream area, mainly the Duqm port and the CZAD area. For the timeline, well, since we announced it back in April, we gave bidders up to 9 months to submit the bid. Obviously, now the time is shorter, but the ability to participate in the auction is still valid. You still have until end of October to submit your statement of qualification. We divide basically the auction into 2 phases. One phase is mainly the qualification. Once you meet the qualification, then you're invited to prepare the bid and receive the RFP and prepare the bid. And within the bid preparation period, you're allowed site visits and also management meetings. Based on this timeline, as you can see, we are targeting awarding the 3rd round of auction, hopefully by next year and the 2nd quarter of 2026. Some key parameters that we like to highlight as well when it comes to the auction itself. So all the projects that we have signed and these ones that we're planning on signing are 47 years in length. They have 7 years of development and construction and 40 years for operations. The Oman take, and basically what Oman kind of benefits from this is basically the land fees. There's discounted land fees during the development and construction phase, and you only pay for the footprint of the project once you start operations. Base royalty and upside fees, very similar to how energy sectors are set up. And in terms of the scope, I think I mentioned as well, it's an integrated scope that covers the renewables, the green hydrogen, the derivative, and the offtake. There is a minimum target hydrogen production that is required. So if you were to bid for 100 square kilometers, the minimum production target is 50,000 tons of green hydrogen per year. And the main reason we set these targets is in order for us to meet the targets that are set for Oman. So the 2040 target is around 3.5 million tons of green hydrogen production by then. So we need to kind of meet those targets as well. And like I said before, infrastructure is shared between projects. Something that we have also provided that is new in this round, specifically in comparison to the previous round, is the option to supply surplus renewable electricity to the grid. This is subject to regulatory approvals, but you have that option in order for you to reach the most prominent levelized cost of hydrogen that you can. And this kind of explains how the green hydrogen supply kind of works. I think I explained as well earlier that if you were to supply green hydrogen to the local industry, you won't be required to kind of transform that into a derivative. However, if you are planning to really export it, then the requirement is to really have a derivative synthesis there. And something that we're adding this time around is that electricity connectivity as well, and being sold to the spot market. Some other things that we have also changed from previous round is the land configuration, like I mentioned before. The qualification criteria as a result of that land configuration has been streamlined to allow for much more flexible combinations of the financial development and operational criteria. We have also adapted the auction timelines, which this time around it's longer than the previous rounds. The previous rounds was around 6 to 7 months in order for us to kind of conclude everything and award. We have waived the bank guarantee since the previous round, and most importantly, we facilitate matchmaking support. So if a developer is really keen on being part of this auction, but feels that they don't have the expertise, for instance, specifically in derivative or in renewables, there is an opportunity for you to actually have an access to other players who are interested in the auction, but are also looking for players to kind of form a consortium as well. And like I mentioned before, it's 2 phases. You have the qualification phase and the bid submission and evaluation phase. It follows a very standard auction or procurement where the minimum compliant bids and qualification criteria are the ones that kind of move forward until we reach the award stage. And in terms of ICV and domestic industry development, I think I mentioned as well that these are key things that we really look at when it comes to maximizing value. And the way that we look at it is these are some of the exemplary contributions that you could look into as they develop the bid, be it developing new Omani service providers, be it having a more developing a forward vertically integrated industry, for instance, something that has to do with e-fuels or something that has to do with more the upstream side, electrolyzer manufacturing or assembly and the likes. Reaching towards the conclusion of my presentation, 5 key drivers maybe to kind of remind everyone on Oman. We have the world-class resources, as you have seen, and the strategic location being bang on in the middle of 2 demand centers really helps both the Asian market and the European market. We have a business-friendly environment. Something that I forgot to mention before is the permitting that we worked really hard in the ecosystem readiness initiatives. So one of the key things that came out of there is a single permit, the one single permit that is awarded automatically to projects versus waiting for a long time until you actually get the permits and allowed to work on the land. So developers are allowed to work on the land immediately and kind of work their way back to meet those requirements of the permits. Tier 1 infrastructure and logistics, as is known, we have Tier 1 ports and already trade in a lot of the derivatives that are targeted, be it steel, be it ammonia, be it methanol. So that's something that we already know how to do. It's an open and structured and transparent process as well when it comes to the auction, which is very different than other players in the hydrogen industry as well, specifically in producer countries. We open the share for everyone to compete and the best one basically wins. And we're very results oriented. We've announced 9 projects in a record time of less than 2 years. So that really shows you that we're really keen, and there's leadership from the top to the bottom to really make sure that this happens for Oman. So potential roles, if you see yourself interested in the green hydrogen development of Oman, basically. You could be a project developer, you could be a financial partner, you could be an OEM, an industrial offtaker, or an infrastructure developer, or any of the bottom ways that you can actually help in R&D or knowledge-based workforce to really help build this industry forward. And if you are really keen on participating in the auction round, I would suggest that you scan the QR code there. Alternatively, you could visit our website and just click on the round 3 auction. So that's hydrom.om, and a button that says round 3 auction will pop up, and you could just get all the details there as well. And on that note, thank you so much, and I'm happy to take questions, which I'm seeing in the chat are quite a lot. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rumaita. It was really an excellent presentations, and it triggers lots of the questions in the chats, and I can pick a few questions, and then we can open the stage as well for the community to ask as well directly. We do have around 20 minutes on that time. So one of the first questions I pick it up here from the chat. I think we have questions asking about just some. Yeah, there's one question about asking what makes Oman uniquely positioned to lead in the global green hydrogen economy, especially compared to other MENA countries and emerging hubs in Africa or Latin America. You mentioned something about shared infrastructures. Would you please zoom in further on that? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's 3 key elements. The first one is definitely the renewable resources that we have. So specifically in green hydrogen, it's the combination of wind and solar that really makes it very prominent. Just to give context, that we are now in the what we call the Kharif season, or the monsoon season, in the middle and south of Oman. And wind speeds over there can reach up to 16 meters per second, if not higher. as well. So those are tier one wind conditions as well. The second thing that I think would be important is our strategic location and also stability. I think more than ever, specifically for those who are really dabbing into the US market, know that stability is very important. And Oman is very known that its laws doesn't change overnight. We're very stable when it comes to the energy sector and the market itself. And most importantly, it's the ambitious hydrogen projects and targets that we have and program that we have, including the shared infrastructure. So we've envisioned all the key things and pain points that we thought the developer might face troubles in, and kind of put ourselves in their shoes and decided that we would share the risk with them. And this is where the shared infrastructure kind of comes in and makes us very unique in that offering. Something additionally to that is we work really hard to kind of ensure that we de-risk as much as possible when it comes to the projects. So for instance, in April of this year, we launched the first liquid hydrogen corridor study to kind of make sure that we are able to ship hydrogen in its liquefied form from Port of Duqm to Port of Amsterdam. That's something that wasn't a request from the developers, but that's something that we were really keen on making sure that we're able to also provide different options and vectors to the developer if they see that this is also useful. So there's a lot of different elements when it comes to that.
This is great. Thank you very much, Rumaitha. One question from Jan Kosko. He's asking a direct question. Does Hydrum plan to support pilot projects to test the new electrolyzers technologies, or is the focus only on just large projects?
Yeah, so Hydrum is mandated to implement Oman's hydrogen strategy, which, as you can see, is quite large scale. With that said, the mandate on pilot projects is actually the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, who have established a committee that will be coming up with a framework for pilot projects. So we haven't disregarded pilot projects whatsoever, but we're still waiting for the regulator to kind of come up with a scheme on how those pilot projects will be evaluated, if it will be similar to an auction process or not. That's something that we are to find out, but we know that this deliverable will be happening sometime soon, and we will share with the market as soon as we have clarity as well.
There is another interesting questions from Osama. Osama Fawzi. Hi, Rumaitha, this is Osama Fawzi from Hydrogen Intelligence. My specific question is why Hydrogen is focusing on EU markets for exporting green hydrogen ammonia instead of focusing on markets in the Far East region, Japan, Singapore, South Korea. The levelized cost will be much better. So any questions, any answer on this domain?
Yes, very happy to answer that question, Osama. I think it's a misconception. We're actually targeting both. So I think throughout my presentation, I did mention we're bang on in the middle of both Europe and Asia. And in fact, a lot of our projects are looking at the Asian market as well. So it's not really focusing on only Europe. Perhaps what you're seeing as well is the developers mostly come from Europe, but we also have a lot of Asian players. So we have South Korean players, we have Japanese players, Thai players who are in the consortium. So I would say it's an actual healthy balance between both markets, and we're actually pursuing both markets diligently.
Excellent. One other questions. Rumaitha, Hydrum did round 1, did round 2. I'm sure it's an emerging market. There is lots of lessons and learn. From your perspective, what are one of the biggest lessons that has learning from round 1 and round 2 and preparing for round 3?
Yeah, I think the biggest lesson is listen to the market. And that was something that perhaps we were quite quickly going to the market with a second round of auction. While we did do a bit of flexibilities there and relaxations there, we actually decided that this time around, we won't launch an auction immediately after we finish round 2. We would take a step back and really do a full market sounding and listen to the market and what they wanted. As a result of that, that's why round 3 is quite significantly different than the previous rounds in terms of the sizing, in terms of the offering, in terms of even how you qualify is quite different. But yeah, practicing a lot of active listening really did help us in kind of really reshaping how this auction would work. And I think this is something that we are instilling within us, that we'll continue doing that exercise before we actually go to the market with another offering.
There's another question from Mudassir Yatu. Is there any target in terms of cost per kilogram for green hydrogen within Hydro?
Yeah, so Hydrom is not like I mentioned, we're not the developer of projects, so we don't have a target. We would love for it to be as low as possible to make Oman competitive, and we're working our level best to do that. But it will be basically up to the developer to decide what their target production is. So it's not really us that sets that target. Yeah.
I'm trying to scroll down through the questions. I think, yeah, some of the questions people came late and they can go back to slides. There's interesting questions from Rafael. Does Hydrogen plan to invest in different hydrogen storage systems? Or what is the view into the hydrogen storage systems other than ammonia and methanol? Are there any plans of Hydrogen to orchestrate the SAF into the upcoming rounds?
Okay, so maybe also to remind everyone that Hydrom is in its mandate. We are not a regulator, we are not an investor, and we're not a developer. What we basically do is master plan and make sure that we're implementing the strategy by bringing all and coordinating, doing a lot of coordination as well. With that said, what we do in the auction round is we provide the freedom to the developer to decide what derivative that they want. So we're not really prescriptive on telling them you need to do ammonia, you need to do steel, you need to do methanol. They are free to choose the derivative of their choice. What we have seen is the majority actually of choosing ammonia, with one project choosing steel. Perhaps round 3 will be different. And Rafael, if you are actually a developer who is really keen on ESAF, you're welcome to actually participate in the auction round and offer a different offering. But that's not us to dictate. It's the developer that decides the most suitable derivative for them and the ones that they can actually secure offtake for.
Thank you, Romain. There are lots of interesting questions, but I see some of them within the commercials boundaries, and we try to avoid that commercials boundaries about specific projects regarding FIDs. But like Saud, you can have that discussions as well offline. It will be available. But in general, there was one very interesting question regarding hydrogen post 2030. What would be the long-term vision for hydrogen post 2030? How does it see its role evolving as Oman reaches the maturity in hydrogen value chain?
Right. So the 3 key things that will really dictate what we do and continue to do is post 2030, we'll still continue doing auction rounds because we have a 2050 target. The second thing that I think is important is actively supporting and building that ecosystem readiness, that we are really working really hard to make sure that Oman is ready by the time that these projects start production. So that's everything from making sure that the infrastructure is ready, making sure that all the supporting mechanisms, be it roads, be it systems, be it workforce, and so on, is prepared for those projects and kind of starting to reap its rewards post 2030. And the last thing is kind of finding all avenues possible to maximize value creation for Oman. One of the main things that I mentioned before is we are anticipating playing an incubator role for local demand. I know for a lot of those who are in SBE know maybe perhaps the integrated gas company. So maybe something similar to that to really aggregate a lot of that local demand and be the main entity, or incubate that process to be the main entity to provide that allocation, because we are assuming, and we already are getting a lot of requests for projects specifically in the north of Oman. So really working on those to kind of make sure that we work in tandem to meet those targets post 2030, inshallah.
Thank you, Rumaitha. I think we asked most of the questions. And what we will do after the meetings, we will share the presentations with your permission, and as well a contact email that we will can keep in touch. And thank you very much on behalf of SBE. And if you'd like to add any closing comments, we are happy here, and the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Talal, for that. I know that there were way more questions as well, so I'm happy to take any of them. I'm easily reachable, and I think the SPE team can share my email as well if you have more questions. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity. If you're really interested in kind of continuing the conversation, please be in touch, either LinkedIn or email. And yeah, looking forward to hopefully continuing the collaboration between Hydrum and SPE, hopefully in the future. Thank you so much, Talal.
Thank you very much, Rumaitha. We will combine all that pending questions, and we will channel it to you with the contact person. Thank you. So with that, we will conclude our monthly seminar today. On behalf of SBE, we thank Rumaitha Al-Busaidi for her excellent discussions, and we will be in touch. Thank you very much.